Rave to the Grave.
Welcome to Rave to the Grave. My guest on today's show is Kurt Eckes, also known as DJ Jethrox, merry prankster and rave outlaw of Milwaukee's drop bass network. In the 90s, Kurt put the state of Wisconsin, America's dairyland, on the map for something other than cheese and prairies and the Packers. Kurt threw some of the wildest raves in the Midwest, probably the whole United States, especially his weekend campout festival Furthur, where he invited Aphex Twin, Richie Houghton, and Daft Punk to play long before the rest of the world even knew who they were. With the Drop Bass Network record label, Kurt and his friend Woody McBride cultivated the sound of Midwest hard acid, hard techno, and hardcore gabber, putting out records that are still pummeling dance floors from Berlin to the Ukraine. Kurt has been at the center of satanic rumors, FBI investigations, and cult controversy over the years, as he's refined a Wisconsin rave aesthetic that's equal parts heavy metal, LSD humor, techno-paganism, and the truly hardcore. And I called him up at his compound, which is on a literal farm in the middle of Wisconsin, to talk all about it. This interview is part one in a two-part series. So if you enjoy this, stay tuned for part two. Welcome to Rave to the Grave. Kurt, welcome to Rave to the Grave.
Thanks for having me.
It's good to see that you haven't raved into your grave quite yet.
Oh man, I was doing good, like on a path to just normal existence. But then we did this reboot, so I might be raving into the grave. I don't know.
You recently rebooted the drop bass label.
Further, and then it's all back to normal. Like this is my living again. You know, for a period of time there after the Rave Act and stuff, we just kind of checked out. I did some different stuff, but yeah, did a reunion party in 2016, and here we are.
What enticed you into throwing a Furthur festival again and kind of back into this rave culture after being out of it for quite a while?
Yeah, it's not really a simple answer when you're just kind of living your life and realizing, you know, the things that you've done. And those are the things I'm good at. Those are the things that make me happy. You're just like, why am I not doing this again? You know, and I think for me, it was like where I was working before for like a period of time there. We had to do like a lot of employee growth type classes, you know, learn about yourself or whatever to try to be better within the company, you know, and move up. And I was like, I don't want to move up. You know, I've already did what I'm supposed to do, you know, like what I'm doing now isn't me, you know, this is just me filling time. When I put it out there, like, yeah, I missed this. I still want to do this. And then when I put that out there, it's like, all right, well, I guess I said I'm gonna, so now I gotta. So yeah.
Yeah, it's a really interesting time right now because there's a heavy 90s revivalism going on. And I think at the same time, there is this, who knows what it's going to be like by next year and 2 years from now, but a lot of new kids have experienced the EDM festival like Electric Forest, EDC, Hardfest, whatever. And I see a lot of people looking for, like, they want to go to the underground that they saw pictures of that happened in the 90s.
For me, it was like in the mid 2000s there, like when Bangface, you know, those parties over in the UK, when they were doing their thing, you know, just the whole rave revival aspect of what they were doing, I was like, it just seems so badass. You know? They're doing now what we were doing in the 90s, and it's cool. You know, it's like it's relevant, and and that kind of seems like now that's sort of like coming full circle again here, where there's this, and I don't know if it's because it's real or if it's just because, you know, us and Tommy Sunshine and everybody else is talking about it, but there's like this real rave revival here now too, and I think like this pandemic is going to be great for that whole, you know, because when this shit's over, people are going to be ready to party, you know, and then it's wherever it's going to have to go down, it's going to go down, and And I think people are going to be into it. And like you were talking about those other festivals and stuff there, like, I've gone to a lot of these, these bigger EDM and bass music events, and they're badass, they got huge production and they're cool. And, they got a good vibe and good music and everything, but they're still not raves, and, we will draw like, just handfuls of kids, I'll say, people in their 20s and 30s to our parties now. And they're just like blown away, just by how free and open and just, no rules, just pedal to the metal it really is, and then, they hear people talk about or read about, this stuff in the 90s and they're like, it's still going on and they're into it, So I think, yeah, it's just, I don't know. I hope it's something to steamroller out of control, at least, because it's what I do.
Yeah, I definitely think you're a fan of the chaotic, semi out of control situation, which I think I think maybe will happen after this is all over. Okay, we'll talk about the Furthur Festival and the raves in a minute. Tell me a little bit about where you grew up and how you grew up and like what music were you attracted to kind of pre-raves and techno existing?
Yeah, I'm a weird person. Like there's this dichotomy about me, like that doesn't make sense, And for me, it all starts with Kiss, and I've talked about this all the time. Just in grade school, like in the 70s or whatever, seeing like the gatefold from Kiss Alive 2, with Ace and Gene up on the platforms, and the fire and just the big production of it all. It's like maybe it's satanic, maybe it's not, but it's rock and roll. To this day, remember just sitting on my bedroom floor staring at that inside of that album, just like, man, this is where it's at. Like I wasn't really into music other than that, all through up to middle school. And then a trip to California, and visiting my cousins out there, and must have been like 1979, 80-ish or something. And they were friends with the Go-Go's, so like I was from rural Wisconsin, Marshfield, center of the state, small town, and nobody heard of the Go-Go's. I'm going to go back and be cool, like, and I was into skateboarding then and wore Vans and stuff. And like, I knew something that nobody else knew, First thing I ever bought with my own money was either The Clash or Joan Jett. I don't remember which album it was, but they're both about the same time anyway, like I was in like around 7th grade, I think. And that's just kind of the way I've always been into heavy metal and punk rock. Well, the heavy metal I was into though was like hair metal, Motley Crue and Poison and stuff. So I definitely didn't go with punk rock, but for me it did, and that just that's what started the whole path for me, I guess, musically at least.
So you kind of like things that have a very defined aesthetic. They have the look and the logo and the whole package.
I don't know anything about music, like even when I started DJing, like I didn't even know what 4/4 timing was, like, and like to this day, I still have no idea. Like people talk about music and like how they make music and just like music structure and harmony and all this stuff, and like I have no idea what any of that even is. Like like I'm an engineer, that's what I went to school for, but I'm just good at marketing, like, and I'm good at like knowing what I like and putting it out there. So, I mean, that's kind of what Drop Bass is about. It's just like, these symbols and like this look and this feel. Like I don't have to say what it is because people know what it is just because of the whole aesthetic.
You kind of watch the birth of raves happen or evolve in the US out of some scenes. What was the first time that you saw something like a rave happening?
It wasn't even just watching the birth. It was like, yeah, craving it. Like my favorite band in the world is Jesus and Mary Chain. So it's like, that sweet poppy music or whatever with underlying noise, So through my obsession with them, I read a lot of like NME and the Melody Maker and those magazines from the UK, like in 86, 87, 88. So like while you're reading these articles, because they didn't have internet then, obviously, stuff. So reading these articles, find out about your favorite band, you're also seeing stuff about Acid House and Manchester and Hacienda and all this stuff. And, it's like, it was kind of around the same time where I started like dabbling in some of those things too, and I was just like, hey, this is cool, like, what's this all about? And then there was a guy in Milwaukee who had a radio show, one of the weeknights, and he was always playing like a lot of early techno and new beat and acid and KLF kind of stuff. So that's sort of like, oh, this is coming to America. It's, it will eventually. We're just gonna wait, and when it does, it's gonna go full steam ahead and just do this thing. At the time, I was going to a lot of clubs in Chicago, and Wade Hampton from Dallas, he was doing this party at the Shelter, Fresh Jive party, and coming out of that, got handed a flyer for a rave party, and it was actually like first or second like rave in Chicago. And this was like maybe January 92. Just getting that flyer was just like the invitation to like everything else that happened after that. I always wanted to own a club. I talk a lot about Medusas and stuff, a club in Chicago, and they were a place that changed their theme a lot, and that's what I liked about Medusas is it was always different. So like doing raves, every rave is different. Every rave's got a theme and, different decorations. You can set it up different, it's a different place. So that's sort of, I'm not a same old kind of person. I like the idea of doing things different all the time,
Medusas is a pretty well-known goth industrial night.
Yeah, it was weird because it was a juice bar, so there would be no alcohol. So early on, they had an all-night license or whatever, which the alderman or the city clamped down on. So then they ended up ending earlier. But yeah, it was just kind of a melting pot for like everybody, really. Like from punks to goths to, there's a Navy base just out, Great Lakes, or whatever, just outside of Chicago. So there'd be tons of people dressed in their Navy outfits. There was over 1,000 people there, I think, on a Saturday night, and it was multi-level club and just a lot going on. And the people that were DJing there, Mark Stevens and Terry Bristol and Psycho Bitch and them, and they were all just go to gramophone, getting these songs that nobody heard and going to wax tracks and just bringing, it was all like happening in Chicago, acid house and industrial. I mean, that's from Chicago, just playing like the most incredible music, and the crowd is super on point, and it was a good place to get your education. It really was like a university, I guess, for counterculture and music. Because like I said, it was multi-level. So like the main room, they'd be playing like, Madonna and New Order, Dead or Alive, and then Fast Eddie and new beat music and industrial. It's all going on. It's just a big hodgepodge. And on the second floor, there'd be like, a punk rock band, like whatever, from Chicago playing in that room. And then the second floor of the video room, they might have like a house DJ, like, one of the early guys up there playing house music, so it's like, it didn't really make sense, but it totally made sense,
And how far do you have to drive to get to Chicago from where you live?
It was like an hour and a half from where we were in Milwaukee, and then another half hour to 45 minutes to find a parking spot or more.
I feel like the Midwest has something in common with the UK in that way, because people from the Midwest are really used to driving to other cities and other places to go to parties. It's not unusual at all.
Yeah. I mean, that's why, like, I think a big part of why our raves worked, because we had enough of them were in warehouses in the city, but because of, when you were talking about the grave rave that got busted or whatever early on, then we started just doing them outside of the city. So you're always driving, 30 minutes to an hour to a barn or like a farm field or wherever,
You went to some of these early raves in Chicago, and then what was the path in between that and you deciding to throw your first event?
In the late 80s, there was like these parties in Chicago that they were called hit and run parties, and they're part of like the gay scene. They were like they were underground parties, after hours. And I remember they happened in like a funeral home or an old bank, and they're basically raves before raves, But like the guy who lived across the hallway from me in my apartment, he was a light guy at Limelight in Chicago, and so he did all these parties and stuff. So I would just kind of like tag along with him and help him, but really just get in free to a party. So yeah, just seeing like early on the behind the scenes perspective, how these things happen, and that was just intriguing to me and what I wanted to do. Then some other people started similarly in Milwaukee doing parties for the gay scene, like they called them Raves, like with two E's at the end. And I'm not sure if it's because they didn't really know the word rave, or I don't know why they were called that, but like, there was a few of those parties, and it was like, well, we can do this. Actually, the first party we threw was in a warehouse that we lived in. Instead we moved out of a house, rented a warehouse that used to be a warehouse that we had skate ramps in. That first year, I mean, we did like our first one in June, then we did one in July, then we did one in August, then we did one in September. We did one a month, like right away. The third weekend in June 1992 was our first. The first party was called E&E, and that was like back in the early days when everyone was doing product ripoffs. So we just took the M&M's package, turned the M sideways so it's at E&E, and then the flyer said something like melts in your mind instead of your hand or something like that. And talking about Medusas and stuff before, they used to, one of the themes that they did there was this acid house theme where they had all these smile lights hanging from the ceiling, which is something that I've done before later on with my parties. But our very first room, the warehouse that we lived in, had a paint booth room in it. So we painted like a big twister thing on the floor and had like these lights hanging from it, so it was basically just like, oh, hey, I'm going to copy what Medusas did in our warehouse, and we're going to put like a 4-corner little sound system in and have some DJs. And it was just all of our friends that DJed at the time, like Nick Nice and Mr. Bill and the guy who owned the local record store. It was, nobody from out of town or anything like that. The story from that one is that I don't know where I got the idea from. I think it was from like maybe the Anarchist Cookbook, where you crush up morning glory seeds, you can get high from it. So we made like a 35-gallon trash can of Kool-Aid, filled it up with morning glory seeds, and told everybody, you had 2 things of Kool-Aid, the regular Kool-Aid and the spiked Kool-Aid, I didn't even know what acid tests were then. I hadn't even read that book, but it was just like, this, just seemed like a good idea to do. But I think there was no internet, so there was no good recipe for what we did, and it just made a lot of people throw up.
So you don't party with people throwing up everywhere playing Twister. Did you get high off it? Like, did it work, or was it just gross?
It was a mixed bag. I think for some people it worked, for most people it didn't. Yeah, and it was the warehouse we lived in, so it's like, yeah, there was people throwing up all over in our house.
So you're like, cool, that was fun cleaning up all that barf. Let's do another party next month.
Oh man. But it was cool because it was like that first party, I was working as an engineer at the time. We had a copy machine at the company, and it was just like going after hours with a ream of like colored cardstock and running through the copy machine and putting it on the cutter. It's like making quarter sheet flyers for our party and handing them out. And that first party, we had a group of people come up from Chicago, so it was like, wow, we got them coming this way, like already, like we're doing something right, They had no idea who these DJs were because they weren't playing in Chicago. They were Milwaukee DJs, Like the next party was in the same warehouse complex. In Milwaukee, there's a lot of tanneries that are shut down, and this old Jewish guy, Ed Kaiser, owned a lot of these tanneries, and his grandson was my skate buddy. And Ed also, coincidentally, owned the warehouse, or the building that the engineering company that I worked for was in. So like Ed's office was like, next to mine, basically. Like I could see his office from outside my window. So it's like I'm working as an engineer for this company, and that guy out there, is taking cash on the table from me to rent me warehouses for parties, and actually I ended up throwing multiple parties in the same building that, my company that I worked for was located. I remember one time the president of the company like called me into the office, and I thought I was in trouble, and he put in the Rave Till Dawn CD. He's like, is this what you're doing in the building here on the weekends? And I was like, oh my God, like I don't even know how to answer this question. But it was pretty much like, okay, my days here are numbered because they know now.
So how much was Ed Kaiser charging you for the use of his abandoned tannery?
I think our warehouse that we lived in was probably like $500 or $600 a month. It wasn't that expensive. And yeah, I'm always a hustler too. So it's like, it was one of these things where it's like, I say, I'll pay electricity separate, but like all these old tanneries have disconnects, so you can pull out the breaker for the meter reading, and still have power to the place. He was always just shocked how we didn't use a lot of electricity for these big parties. He had this guy that worked for him whose name I can't remember right now, but he was kind of the caretaker for a lot of the properties. So he knew what we were up to. Ed didn't really know what we were up to. And this guy would, let us break in occasionally. And that second year we had Moby, and the city was that was after that big bust that you were talking about before. The city was going to help us do like an all night legal party, but then at the last minute, they're like, yeah, hell no, we're not going to help you do an all night legal party. You're going to have to do it in this club and it's going to end at 2 like every other party, So we're like, okay, cool. So then we did it there till 2. And then afterwards, the caretaker guy let us break into one of the warehouses. And then we just had an all night party with Moby and Scotto and all those guys, after hours that Ed didn't know about and the city didn't know about.
Yeah, this is cool. So it's like Scotto is from NASA in New York, and Moby would have been living in New York then, I guess. Was this the era of Moby where he was like getting naked and standing on the keyboards?
Oh, I think that's how.
Was that later?
How he was born, maybe, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I remember the rider, like March 93 or whatever. I don't even know what any of this stuff is. And we're getting like all this equipment. Like, holy man, like this is going to be amazing. But wait, why are we getting all this equipment? He didn't ask for any cables. So it was basically just a lot of equipment, a DAT player, and Moby standing on his keyboard with his arms out. Yeah.
Well, I guess if the drugs were good enough, no one really was noticing if it was plugged in or not.
Totally.
Speaking of the drugs, okay, your first party was called E&E instead of M&M. How was the E back then in Milwaukee and Chicago?
In like 87-ish, when I first started going to clubs, I worked at a skateboard shop, and my boss, his best friend was from Dallas and used to work at a place down there, run a place where ecstasy was and was legal, like in the mid 80s. So he had like the most insane hookups for that. So that was the first thing I ever did, like it just like this. And I still remember to this day where I took my first pill of ecstasy, like driving underneath Chicago, going on to Lakeshore Drive, it's like, all right, take this now, and it's like 30 minutes later, we're inside Medusas. It just, what the hell is going on? Like this is amazing. So yeah, it was good through till about 99 maybe. So
do you think a lot of these ideas of like the early rave scene were like fueled specifically by the things people would come up with while they were on ecstasy in particular?
I don't know. Partially fueled, but more funded. So like, that like every promoter was that's where they got their income source. It wasn't just the Midwest. It was the United States, like there was all the people that I was connected to at least. Plus, like you just said, like coming up with these grand visions, while you're high as hell, like, oh, this will be cool. Yeah.
So like in your experience, were the promoters running the teams of people that were selling E, or were they just getting all the kickbacks from the E dealers that would come to the parties?
Yeah, no, without naming names, I mean, it was both, obvious, so it's like, it was, yeah, a lot of it coming from both ways, like your own and plus everybody else paying for the rights to do the same thing, It wasn't just that, it was like nitrous and, everything else, it was like, it's kind of a little bit sad maybe when you think about it. That's what drop bass is. It's like a music and drug reference, so it's like, that's what the parties were, they go hand in hand, they feed off of each other. It's like the whole point of rave, in my opinion. So that's what the acid tests were all about back in the 60s as well, and ultimately you're doing all this to have a good time, but also, maybe use it as a tool to find out some things about yourself, and take from that what you will and get on with your life or or ruin your life. I don't know.
I guess I have to ask you, even though the story has been told a number of times, about your trip to New York to go to the Storm Rave. Um, so for people who aren't familiar, Storm Raves are a pretty legendary series of parties that Frankie Bones threw with his brother Adam Eckes and with Heather Hart. They were all DJs and they ran a record store in New York called Sonic Groove. Heather also ran a rave zine called Under One Sky. And these were like some of the first raves in the US and some of the more iconic raves in New York City specifically. So did you go to the Storm Rave before you had started throwing your own parties?
No, because we started, like I said, in the summer of '92, and that Storm Rave we went to, I don't remember if it was December '92 or January '93. It was like that winter, you know. It all ties together, you know, because it's weird and you don't think about it at the time for sure, and only when you're putting like the pieces together later, where you're just like, holy shit, you know, now it kind of makes sense, you know, because Woody McBride was our first out of town booking, and he did a zine, which is basically it was a tip sheet, you know, of music, and his zine had an ad for Heather's zine, which was also the Under One Sky, which talked about music and records, because there's no other way to find out about that stuff, you know?
What was Woody McBride's zine called?
Disco Family Plan. Woody Changes has a lot of names for a lot of things, you know? So that's the one I remember, but he may have had another name. But Heather Zine was so influential for like the direction of the Midwest, you know, like because I was throwing these parties in Wisconsin and Milwaukee and Chicago and Minneapolis and putting the sounds out there that I liked, but I was getting this from Heather and Adam and Frankie. The second party I ever went to was this party called Groovier in Chicago, and Adam X was the headliner. Before I knew anything about the East Coast, it was just like, who is this guy? Like, he's a maniac, you know, playing all this music that I've never heard. It's amazing, you know? So yeah, going to Brooklyn for, it was actually in Staten Island that year for a Storm Rave was kind of just like a pilgrimage. But at that time, you know, like me and Tommy and, you know, we had a group of people, like we'd go fucking anywhere for a party, you know, it's like, oh, you know, Inner City's playing in Detroit, I guess we're going there. Or, you know, Keoki's playing in Cincinnati, I guess we're going there, you know, and oh, here there's a party at the State Palace in Louisiana. Well, let's go to New Orleans. And like, they got these crazy desert parties out in San Diego called Narnia. Let's get in you know, we drove to these things, you know, and it's like, spent 2 days to get to a party out in the desert, you know, and, but I don't know if you know Tommy at all, but I mean, it's just like, you know, you're spending more than an hour with him and it's already an adventure, you know? So
So what was your experience like going to this Storm Rave? I understand that you smoked PCP accidentally, which seems like a very New York thing to have happen.
Tommy, I think, may have.
This is Tommy Sunshine, who we're talking about.
Yeah, Tommy's crazy. He's a nutter, you know, like he'll tell stories or, you know, Tommy's obviously pretty famous or whatever, you know, so he tells a lot of these stories about these adventures that me and him would go on. But then I would be like, well, that's not really the way I remember it. You know, I forget a lot of stuff. So I'm just like, screw it. I'm just going with the legend, you know, because that's the way Tommy told it. That's what happened, you know? So we got there early. It was a whole adventure just getting there, you know, through major snowstorms, 2 vans, you know, like no internet, no cell phones, no nothing. Just like we meet some kids at a party somewhere and said, we're going to meet you at such and such a exit at such and such a time on this date on our way to New York, you know, and somehow, you know, you get to exit whatever in Ohio. And there's this other van load of kids, you know, going to go with us to this party in New York, you know, and we got out there early, we went to Sonic Groove and met all those guys and hung out a little bit. And then, yeah, we got to the party early, you know, way before anybody else. It was at a horse barn on Staten Island, and seeing it all get set up, just watching it all like build and turn into this like crazy experience. Our car was like right next to the warehouse or the horse barn, you know, the first one right there. Tommy was in there in the fetal position, curled up in a ball, like, and I'm like, you know, devil horns in the air, like, this is the best fucking time of my life. You know, and he's like, kill me now. we both had different takeaways from that party. Me, it was like, I'm never turning back. And Tommy was like, I'm never going back. Yeah, it was mind blowing just to see maybe, you know, a couple thousand guys, gangsters, you know, New York people and 10 girls, you know, and just like this giant wall of sound before the Midwest was doing wall of sound. after that Storm Rave, we did our 1-year anniversary party in '92, which was fairly a hard party, and it was in a horse barn, kind of like Storm Rave was, so it's like, all right, I think we're on, people in Milwaukee didn't know any different, between house and hardcore. Well, they knew, but like it was all new to everybody, so it's just like, well, if we give them this is what they're going to think exists, sort of thing, So I was like, all right, well, let's do hardcore because this is what we like, and that 1-year anniversary party was fairly hard. And then the very next party we did was a party called Genesis, where we had Lenny D play at it, and Effects and Tron and Delta 9. It was like hardcore from start until sunrise. And then we also had house music, but it was just one DJ outside, like on a really tiny sound system around a fire, kind of like, yeah, fuck that music. This is what we're about here, And yeah, that party pretty legendary. It was sold out. It was a kind of just like, all right, this is what we're about, and that's just the way Milwaukee is in general. It's a colder, harder, darker town, and I mean, industrial's from Chicago, but like everybody in Milwaukee is into that, and so it just kind of went hand in hand, worked out.
Not the Midwest aesthetic, but the Milwaukee aesthetic specifically. I felt like when I went out there, and like other people have said this to me recently too, that it was like such a specific thing. It was very like metal. Almost like you imagine like Norway, like black metal was like the aesthetic of the rave.
I mean, it is, Milwaukee's like a German town, and it's like blue collar and cold, and it's all the things that make sense. That's what the Scandinavian, all that, it looks like, it feels like as well. And Milwaukee's had a big punk scene at the time, but they also had like a big death metal scene. It's like Metal Fest would happen in Milwaukee every year, like at the Mecca Auditorium, which is where the Bucks played. Like the big Coliseum there. It's just like 3 days of black metal and death metal. And it was great.
I'm curious about the legality of all this. So like the police were already cottoned on to raves and busting things in '92, and we'll get to the Rave Act much later. But what did you have to figure out about like local zoning and
You're implying that I did figure it out.
yeah, or didn't figure out. You can tell me about the disasters too.
I'm a hustler and I like figuring out ways to get away with things. I mean, it's a used car salesman type of thing, it's just like I'm always thinking, like, how can I get away with this? How can I do something that I'm not supposed to do? I don't like rules. I like breaking them, but I like getting away with it too. Like I don't, there's this Hell's Angel shirt that I have. It says it's only a crime if you get caught, So as long as I'm not getting caught, like I'm not doing anything wrong. I used to be friends with like Tef and Reza and those guys out in California when they're doing like the big parties out there. And I, just ask them the same thing, like, how do you get away with this shit? And they're just like, bro, like there's people doing things way worse than what we're doing, like we're not even on anyone's radar, So like that sort of mentality sort of like stuck with me. There was those early parties, and then the authorities were kind of like keeping an eye on us, trying to figure out what was going on. And but then the first party that they decided to like shut down wasn't one of our parties. It was the party that Woody McBride was doing in Milwaukee, that Grave Rave party where they arrested, 900 and some people. And so we dodged a bullet there, but then it sort of like forced it to go like way underground, like right after that. It's like, all right, we're getting a little cocky right out of the gate here. We need to like take a step back. Realistically, what happened was when they did that grave bust, like I was a person of interest or whatever, so I had to get a lawyer, and we went in and talked to the police. When they did that bust, they gave everybody a ticket for underage drinking, or, because they had no idea what the party was, that they thought it was like a big kegger, and it was really a rave party. They get in there and they found a 6-pack of beer that Rob Hood had in the DJ booth, like 930 people got a drinking violation for a 6-pack of beer, 12-pack, or whatever it was in the DJ booth, like that doesn't make sense. So like when I went in to talk to them with the lawyer, they brought out like this stack of paper, a file, like it was pretty significant, where I was like, holy shit, like I'm just from rural Wisconsin, like this isn't, I'm in trouble. And they're just looking through what they had and, them talking about what they knew, it was like, you guys have no clue, like not even at all. Like you, like zero, like it's going to take you a year to just even catch up, like you've already spent like 6 months to be farther behind than you were when you started, So like I was never super worried about it. I figured as long as we had a space. So we did that Moby one the next year, would have been the summer of 93. And I think at that point, we had already kind of established Drop Bass Network, in Milwaukee. And I was friends with a lot of Chicago promoters and stuff. So we just started like teaming up, just trying to make our parties more and bigger, Like I've always been, and I say this all the time, just like a big fish, big pond kind of guy. I want to be a badass, but I don't want to be a badass to like a small group of people. I want to be a badass to like a big group of people. That's why I'll work with pretty much any promoter. It doesn't, just if I can make the scene get, another group of people into it, that's the whole point, just to get as many people doing this as possible, So that's kind of what happened in 93 was, did a lot of parties with people in Chicago. That's the Psychosis party with Psychic TV that you were talking about. That was with Ripe. It was a group in Chicago. It was their like brainchild. And then he, Roger, the guy who runs that, he's the same way as me. He'll work with whoever. He just wants to like make these parties all that can be. I'm not even exactly sure how Psychic TV got there, but it's weird because it's like, Psychic TV was there, so Genesis was there, but so was the kooky scientist Fred Gianelli. He was like the guitar player for Psychic TV at the time. And Fred's played for me multiple times as Kooky Scientist, which is on Plus 8. Ben Stokes, from DHS, like he was in Psychic TV at the time, and that's the party that Richie played at as Richie Rich. Like these things didn't register with me then, but looking back, when I'm on Discogs, like, wait a second, like you were in that band then? Like, why did we ever talk about this? It's just, it's weird. But yeah, that first Psychosis, like I think the theme was just to like it was like 4 or 5 promoters coming together and just trying to do something grand, and crazy, hence the name Psychosis, I guess. That grand union of like multiple promoters from multiple cities working out like right away like that was just sort of triggered, well, let's all just keep doing this, Then of course there got to be tons of infighting and stuff, and it didn't work out eventually, but it did in 93 and 94, It was more about tricking venues into like letting us use them than it was like tricking authorities into what we were doing, So I know in the early 90s, we did a lot of video shoots for MTV. So I don't know where all that footage went, but MTV, it's getting used for a lot of up and coming bands as background video.
Amazing.
I remember we did our 10-year anniversary party. It was an illegal party in an abandoned theater. And, that was in 2002. So just to make it feel like a party in 92, we had 2 map points and had everybody sign a video release shoot, and wear a cast member wristband, and all this. It's like in 2002, we were way over the video shoots, but we're like, all right, we're going to pretend we're doing this again, The good thing we did, because like the cops showed up about 6 a.m, it's just, well, fuck it. Yeah, we're doing a video shoot here. It's like, oh, okay, well, that doesn't make sense, but it seems legit, I guess.
So tell me about the creation of the first Furthur festival campout rave adventure.
I think Furthur was like the first techno campout in America. Like we racking our brains trying to figure out, there was no other thing. This didn't happen here yet. It wasn't a new thing, but nobody did it. There was Narnia and stuff like that, but that was just a one night party. This Furthur was like a multi-day, multi-genre thing. So like EDC, all these things that are Dr. Force, all this stuff, is like started with that party, in 94, which is mind blowing to even like think about, So it's like at the time I had read the Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test. I've only read 5 books in my life, and that was like the second or third one that I've ever read, So it's like it's a pretty good place to start, I think. And so at the time, it's like we were doing all the things that they were doing in the acid test, but they were doing it way better. We pale in comparison, It's like, well, we need to do that, Do you know David Prince?
Yeah, I met him before. I don't know him very well.
Okay, yeah, right. So like he was a good friend of mine. He had that Reactor magazine in Chicago, and we were going out to eat, and I just conceptualizing some ideas I had with him, and it was basically just me saying to him, like, what do we need to do to take this a step further? And his response being, do it for more than one night. Oh shit, you're right. Like, that is how you got to go further. So, and Woody McBride got involved at the same time, and Woody's amazing. Like, he's a dreamer, and it's like his ideas aren't always the best, but they're ideas, and they're, so yeah, it was like, it really took him being like, yeah, we could totally do this, with no clue, like, how we're going to actually do this, So it was like Woody's idea, Dave's like cheerleading, and my financial backing is like, all right, we're going to do this thing, and hopefully this works out.
So tell me about the first Furthur. Where was it? What year? Who did you book? And what happened?
Oh, that's a podcast in itself.
I know.
And it's funny because I don't remember, like, a lot of the way I remember a lot of, I keep really, I archive everything, like I think that's what's cool about the 60s is a lot of it's archived, and you can revisit. There's not a lot of stuff that's lost to time from the 60s. So I knew right away that the rave scene was like a significant counterculture movement, and I didn't know it was going to go on as long as it did or become what it did, but I just saved everything and archived it. My point is all my parties, like, I saved everything from every party, from my first thought and notes all the way to like the final receipts, are all in manila folders, organized, by production, venue, talent, and everything. So I could just go back and revisit, so a lot of my memories from that first Furthur, because it was happening at the time, you're just living it, you don't think about needing to remember it, a lot of my memories are me going back in my notes being like, oh, this is how we got Aphex Twin to come there. Honestly, I just know that it was like an idea that started. I was super good at getting venues. I raced motorcycles growing up, so motocross. So like, I raced at this place where we did the Furthur at, and the guy who owned it, Chris, was a friend of ours. I know him forever. I just said, hey, if we give you $2,500, can we use your place for a weekend for a party? He's, oh, hell yeah. We had no clue, didn't know there was such thing as like a health and human services department that, and there's sanitation things you got to pay attention to, or group gathering ordinances, or like sound ordinances, like whatever, like that didn't exist, So it's like when we get to the venue and start setting up, it was pouring rain. It was supposed to be in this valley, and it would have been like super bomb down in the valley, because no one would have heard it. We'd have got away with it really good, but the trucks, nothing could get down there, So we're like, all right, we got to set it up on top of this hill, so that there was a bunch of noise complaints and stuff. But there was an event going on in that county called Weedstock. The county had spent years trying to get this Weedstock event out of their county, so they made a pretty airtight group gathering ordinance. Every county in the United States basically has a group gathering ordinance that's based off of what happened because of Woodstock, But there's a lot of counties in like places like Wisconsin that don't have them. After we started doing Furthur now, the last county that didn't have one was Ashland County, where we did the last Furthur. And now Ashland County has a group gathering ordinance. So every county in Wisconsin has a group gathering ordinance.
Because you threw a party there, and then after that party, they were like, oh God, we got to put this into law.
That county was different. They actually worked with us. They wanted input. Like, we don't want to kick you out, but we all don't want to lose our jobs. We need these tourism dollars. We need this income. We like that you bring, several thousand people to the area. We just don't like that we got to answer to a bunch of people on Monday morning, and why aren't there laws to prevent this? That's a whole other story. So yeah, at that first Furthur, like that Thursday, like the sheriff's department shows up with their group gathering ordinance, which they hadn't even used yet. And we're just like, what's this? And they're like, well, if you go over a certain number of people, then you got to comply with all these regulations. And it's like, oh shit, this ain't good. I think their number was 750 at the time. And because it was like 3 hours from Milwaukee and, 6 from Chicago or 5, like not everybody was getting there at the same time. So, like, they were there counting people as they come in, but it was like 1, 2, really slow. So they didn't get past 750 on that first day. So they kind of just gave up on that. But yeah, we had to go into the sheriff's department and have a meeting. And I'm not a plur person, But like, I thought, well, that's going to be my approach with the sheriff. You know, it's like, we're doing this whole peace, love, unity vibe event here, you know, and Woody's like kicking me under the desk, like, shut up, you sound like an idiot, you know? So then he just told him, you know, like, look, we're going to have a party, we're going to be good, you know? And the party actually ended when the sheriff came there on Saturday morning. David Prince was high as hell, you know, got naked on top of the speakers because he, you know, he decided, I'm going to do something that's going to put this party in overdrive. And then shortly after that, the sheriff came, you know, about noise complaints. And it's like, Dave, the sheriff wants to talk to you at the end of the driveway, you know, because he's high, he can deal with the cops, you know, and like, I need to help stay here and run the party. So Dave got in the cop car. The cop drove him around, showed him all the places he could hear it from, and then told him what was going to happen to him when he went to jail that night with all the drunks, you know? So that was kind of how it all ended.
Yeah, you definitely, if you're going to throw raves, you need that person, right? That's like just somehow good at talking the law enforcement off the ledge.
Nowadays, you know, with the world and what's going on, it's not necessarily like a good personality trait to be able to like identify with police or whatever. But I mean, from at that point, you know, being a redneck and like, you know, I could talk the talk, you know, and you know, I could be as just hillbilly as all of them, you know, and just say the things out they needed to hear, you know, and like let them think that I'm one of the guys, you know, just one of them, you know, and that's sort of always been my edge, even, you know, like going to all these like large assembly committee meetings, you know, you're dealing with a lot of, you know, rural people that are afraid above all these kids coming in from the city, you know, doing this whatever. But well, here's this guy over here, you know, the promoter's one of us, you know, like he ain't gonna lie to us, you know, why would he, you know? When we were doing a party in Ashland, the county board chair, I met him at like his sawmill that he owned. He starts talking about Nam and just like, you know, next thing you know, he's pulling his gun out of his pants, like, check this out, you know, and I was like, oh, you know, so talking about his gun, you know, and stuff. It's just like, this has nothing to do with the party, but it's like, Pete, you know, we're the same person, you know, like, you know, I'm not going to do anything wrong, you know, like we're all on the same page here, you know, like let's just make some money for me, for the county, you know, we're all in this together, you know, and nobody wants to be taken advantage of, you know.
Further was obviously the first appearance of Daft Punk in the US.
Right.
Legendary. You had Aphex Twin. When you think back on it, like who were the craziest guests for you or the ones that you were the most excited about?
Honestly, it was the Spiral Tribe guys, you know, like, because they're, you know, they were called Arzak 23 at the time. Actually, not the Furthur that you played at was, there was some Spiral Tribe people at that one, but not the crew from England that we were supposed to be. That would have been like the second year in a row that we tried to get them over, but it didn't work out. But yeah, they played at the party that you're talking about, the Psychic TV party, the third installment of that. The party was called Psychosis. At Psychosis 3, we had Derek May and a bunch of junglists and MCs from the UK and those two guys from Spiral Tribe, you know? So it's like when they came, you know, it's just like the way they think about music and parties and life and everything. It's just what I aspired to, you know, I guess. So like just having them come over, be super cool, and just they stayed with me for a week and stuff, you know, and that was the one where it was a big deal at the time. But now looking back, every one of them is a big deal, you know, just like thinking about like having Daft Punk or Aphex Twin, you know, we had Aphex Twin live and DJing, you know, and like at the time having Aphex Twin live was cool because he's that weirdo guy from the UK, you know, and I got all tons of his records here, you know, but like it was just Richard D. James, you know, it wasn't like God like he is now. It's like, I still send the letter to them every single year, you know, trying to like, you know, if Bon Jovi and Bruce Springsteen can do underground events without their name on a flyer, so can you, damn it, you know, but they don't see it the same way I do.
Did you ever find any crazy things at these venues that you would show up to do a rave at?
Yeah, totally. Because especially in Chicago, where there was a big speakeasy, you know, underground or whatever, you know, and there's multiple levels to everything. It's like you go in a lot of these theaters and stuff, and they'll connect underground to like a bar down the block, you know? So it's like, yeah, you go into like these passageways, tunnels and stuff, and, you know, doorways where you come out into a bookstore, you know, like 2 blocks away. So yeah, there was a lot of that sort of stuff. And it's funny you mentioned that because I was just painting in my old studio room and I was using these paint brushes. The second party we did, that reality party, the next warehouse that was connected to it was like a Kmart stocking area. So I went in and stole like 3 boxes of like painting supplies. So I got enough rollers and brushes and all this stuff, you know, for a lifetime.
Okay, you are no stranger to kind of hectic rave environments, and throwing stuff like a 3-day camp out, much less just a regular like break-in rave, involves a lot of like crazy stuff. What is the most in danger that you've ever felt? Or for you, what was the most wild kind of situation where you're like, I don't know how this is going to turn out or how we're going to get out of this?
It never hit you until later because you just had such big balls, you know, like you just thought like you were so fucking good at what you did. Like who's going to stop you, you know? And it's like not a good attitude to have, but it's kind of, you know, it's like if you believe in manifestation and all that kind of stuff, then it's a perfect attitude to have, you know? It's like if you believe you're not going to get caught, you probably won't get caught, you know? So, and I've always been good at like figuring out those loopholes, you know? So it's like when we did a little further in 99, completely illegal. And, you know, I knew there was a group gathering ordinance there, but my whole approach was to find the highest up person in the county that's least likely to know about the group gathering ordinance and get that person to send me a fax saying that there's no such thing as a group gathering ordinance. So when the sheriff shows up, piece of paper, so-and-so has told us that we don't need this, you know, an entrapment sort of thing, I guess. You know, I've never I've never had the ACLU or lawyers or, you know, anybody backing me on any of this stuff. So I don't know like the legal ramifications or like the legal way to talk myself out of things. I just know like the play dumb sort of way. Well, I got this, you know, and what do you mean, you know? And that's the way a lot of the furthers was just at the time in the 90s, I had nothing to lose, you know? So it's like would just do whatever. But now it's like, you know, I got a farm and I got like things, you know, and I got my life established or whatever. So I got everything to lose. And then when we did Further at 16, it was like, just did it all without permits. And well, here's how we're going to get away with this, you know, and this is going to work out, you know, and like, I don't know how it does. I guess I'm just lucky. I'm just not good at like bookkeeping or just the organizational aspect of things, you know, and Donnie and Pasquale and those guys, this is, you know, they make a lot of money doing what they do, you know, and like, I feel like had I had my shit together at some point, I maybe could have done more with it, you know, but I was always just me, you know, so it was like, and I don't know if that's part of being controlling or being lazy or just not smart enough to like figure those things out, you know, or that smart about those things. So yeah, it's like I'm just always limited by the amount of time that I could put into something, you know, and that's like if you look at like all that stuff coexisted in the 90s, you know, like the labels and the merchandise and the parties, but it's like they didn't all happen at the same time. It's like we work 3 months hard on a party, do the party, shut the parties down, release 4 records, shut that down, put out some new merch, stop that, do another party, you know, and that's kind of my MO, I guess. even now, you know, it's like I can't really multitask on anything, not because I'm not good at multitasking, just because, you know, there's only 24 hours in a day to like do that sort of stuff. Plus, like I'm not very technological savvy, you know, so like, and unfortunately, that's kind of probably a big hindrance at this point, you know, like if I would take the time to learn WordPress, you know, and could actually have a website and like, you know, do the things I want to do, have it be a destination place for history and merchandise and all that stuff, you know, like, so I guess I kind of blew it. But now where I'm at, like I live like in the middle of nowhere. it's just Amish people around here mostly, and they definitely aren't interning for Drop Bass Network.
Yeah, I saw that you recently had a new calf or helped a baby calf survive.
Oh, that's that whole dichotomy thing. Like, it's like I'm pretty passionate about like farming and, and agriculture and stuff. That's like the other side of me, and takes up a lot of my time now. You just do what feels good. And that's something that feels good, I guess.
You're talking about some things earlier that influenced you. So there was Spiral Tribe, who were throwing these anarchic, free traveling raves in the British countryside and kind of had this like techno pagan modern shaman thing going on. And then you were talking about the electric Kool-Aid acid test. So there's like this 60s acid prankster thing. Did you feel like there was a greater goal with throwing things like the Drop Bass parties and like Furthur Festival besides like, we're just going to throw the craziest party?
Oh, no, there totally was. I'm just not like super good at expressing it, For me, I just like to rave, So that's like the top line thing for me. And that's kind of sort of like why maybe I'm not fitting in necessarily, but like there's been a shift, in the past several years where like this whole music scene is sort of like this community social justice vibe, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it's just not like where I came from. Everybody feels like you got to be over here, like this is where you got to be now. And it's like, well, that's cool. And you're free to like do that at my parties and express that. And, we can all work on that together, but I'm going to be over here, like, putting together a big sound system with some badass DJs, and we're all gonna get really high and stay up for 3 days, and have a cool experience. And that's gonna be what connects us on this community level, and then we can do like these greater things. You're just wanting people to get whatever they want out of it, just to give them a space to like get out of the world, the rat race, and all the pressures that are out there, where you could just be free, and that whole temporary autonomous zone concept, where it's just like there's this chaotic place where there's no rules, there's no structure, we're breaking it down for you as basic as you can get. It's like if you can't figure something out for yourself in that environment, then you're probably not going to figure something out for yourself. But we really hope that you do. And here's some LSD that might help you along, So like for us, that was kind of like the thing, it's just like, nobody's really that pie in the sky, but you just want to make the world a better place, and evolve into better people, and same thing that they were doing in the 60s, they were just trying to like turn people on, come and be who you are, and that's like what I got from those hit and run parties that I was talking about that were in the gay scene in the late 80s, it was just like, let your fucking freak flag fly, because nobody cares here, like it's not weird, nothing is weird, and that was sort of getting lost early too quick, like in the rave scene, once like all these genres and like when the rave scene started kind of like going into that where it's like, it just seemed really cliquey with music styles and cities and stuff like that, and for me it was always like, well, there's nothing wrong with all that, but we're not pushing any boundaries anymore. We just became the thing that we hated, like we hated these people in high school or wherever, college, that were like divided up like this, and now we're divided up like that, so that's why with like Furthurs and a lot of our parties and stuff, it was always about like, pushing boundaries, realizing that the line is here. Well, we're just going to go like a little bit farther than that, because if we do, then everybody's going to be out of their comfort zone a little bit, and when you're out of your comfort zone is when you get a little like, experimental and start putting lamb hearts in your ass, I guess. All that was part of it, but I mean, the end justified the means in that case, and that's sort of like it is with our events, it's like, it might, a lot of this stuff might rub a lot of people the wrong way. But if at the other side of this, like these things are happening that are for the greater good, then I guess so be it. That's how we got there.
You've been listening to an interview with Kurt Eckes of Drop Bass Network. This is part 1 of a 2-part series, so make sure you check out part 2. Rave to the Grave is recorded at the historic Newsstand Studios at Rockefeller Center in New York City. The show is hosted and produced by me, Vivian Host. Our engineer is superstar Joe Hazen. Our theme song, and all additional music in this episode, is by Star Eyes. You can listen to Rave to the Grave on Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information on this and other episodes, check us out on the web at ravetothegrave.org or follow us on Instagram at ravetothe.grave. Until next time, permission to party.